who are we building this for? We're building it for the students, Lambda students. So that user first mindset here coming into play. And so now let's open it up. So not everybody at once, but Britt, Alice, Dustin, Spencer, any thoughts here? Anything else we want to add or take away or refine?
I like this for just a general problem statement. Eventually, like I'd have data before coming up with this, like how many students, but this is great, a great starting point.
Totally. I think we're going to do some user research here and we'll refine it even further. That's a really good point as well. This will change over time as you learn more about the problem you're solving. Totally okay.
I like that we are, I mean, we're staying true to the problem. We're talking about how this can be specific for Lambda students. And I don't, when we build this project, I want it to have its own flair for something that sets it apart from other platforms like Medium that makes it really cool for Lambda students. So I like that we're staying true to that.
I definitely think one thing we need to take into consideration is how will we verify who's signing up, that they actually are a Lambda student. So that might be one thing that we need to consider.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And as you're talking out your problem statement, you'll probably have a bunch of thoughts, right? You'll start getting some assumptions that you're going to want to verify here. So we'll say assumptions like this. And so I think a really important one is what sort of verification do we need for students? These can be questions, they can be assumptions. And you want to keep track of these, right? A lot of times you don't have a note taker in the group or somebody who is paying attention and everybody says 1,000 ideas and you lose them if you're not paying attention to them. That's happened to me. I think it's happened to every other expert on the panel. So definitely try and write down these ideas no matter where you are in the process, because you might be like, oh, what was that idea that we had 3 months ago? And you won't be able to remember it. So that's a really a good one to add here. Any other thoughts? Any other ideas?
Do we want to allow them to, do we want to allow students to comment on published posts, or is this merely just a platform to just get your post out there and that's it?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. So I think this kind of gets to this kind of share point that we're talking about. And what does that share look like, and how interactive do we want that social experience to be? So let's kind of dive into that a little more. So we could say something like publish, interact, and share this work, or we could say, so we could just tweak the problem statement, or we could kind of come up with an assumption here. We're assuming that students will want to have some a dialogue on their work. I think that's a really good assumption to verify. I can definitely see that going both ways. So let's kind of write that one out. So students will want to have a dialogue about their work.
Just to add to Spencer's point, if we are allowing students to comment on other students' work, are we allowing anonymous comments, or do we need students to actually be logged in and verified before they can make comments?
Yeah. Would these would comments or let's say, would these interactions need be anonymous or not? I think that's a really, really good point to make as well. And I think we want to call these assumptions here as you're going through these exercises, because we don't know. Like, we could all probably take a guess, like, okay, like, of course they would want some sort of commenting system because that's what every other blog in the world has. But we don't know. Maybe students are nervous publishing their first work for the first time, and they don't necessarily want to have a dialogue about their work. They just want to put it out there. I think that thinking from that user perspective is so, so important here. And that's why we're going to verify this. We're going to do some user interviews. We're going to do some user research to make sure we're traveling down a path that our users want here. So I would keep putting my instructor hat and my professional hat back on and whatnot here. But what other assumptions do we have?
That a blog is the right way to do it. I don't know how to. Every time I open up Medium, I'm like, I have a great idea, and then I just look at a blank screen, and I'm like, oh, I give up.
Yeah, that's so true. That's a fundamental assumption of what we're trying to build. So maybe we'll find out that blogs are not the best way. Maybe we could build some other sort of aggregation service that would be a little bit more suitable.
Playing off of Alice's point, if it's a blog, what type of medium are we including? Is it just text? Are we allowing users to upload videos? Are we allowing users to upload photos? How do we want users to express themselves on this platform?
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's great. I was just talking with Elizabeth about this, and she was saying that maybe you also said this, Nick, that hiring managers don't want videos, but then for web, they like videos, so I don't even know anymore.
Yeah. Maybe it makes sense for us to hone in on a specific track of students. Maybe web students will have different functionality, different feature than UX students. I think that's probably going to be the case as well. So it'd be interesting if we interviewed somebody or a couple of students from different tracks, that we would have that same the same results in that research.
I think
Dustin, were you going to say something? Oh, sorry, Spencer. Didn't mean to cut you off there.
Very good. Dustin, did you want to say something?
No. You're good.
Okay. Something that I thought was actually really interesting with the point of maybe the blog isn't the best way to share this. I just kind of had the thought of, what if this was more of like a slightly more structured thing, so that we don't get that like blank page shock, where maybe it's more of like a Mad Lib style thing. So we say, what kind of thing do you want to write about? Where it's like, I want to write about how I solved this problem. And it could kind of give you a few bulleted points to say, okay, well, tell me how you solved the problem, and tell me, what resources were helpful to you that may be also helpful for other students encountering this problem, so that they could have a little bit more of a structured way of going about sharing, their experiences and ideas, rather than just it being a completely blank page. Because I think we've all experienced that shock of being like, I have no idea where to start at all.
Yeah, I love that idea. Definitely something we can explore. At this point, no such thing as a bad idea. Cool. So I think we're a little pressed for time in having an hour-long session here, but this is a really critical point in our learning juncture here, and making sure that we have assumptions that are going to be worth testing, so then we can go and prioritize them and actually do our user research. So at this point in time, I think you can do a generative brainstorm activity like this, where you're all just kind of talking, taking turns, but you can do it asynchronously as well. So I want to show you all some different ways to go about this. Let's go ahead, and maybe everybody on the page here, you can write your name and then add some bullets underneath here. And everybody, let's just take 1 minute or so, or let's do 2 minutes here, and just try and brainstorm as many assumptions as we can come up with, right? And so that way, I'll go ahead and I'll get a 2-minute timer here, and we'll just come up with this together. So we'll go ahead. That is off to the races. And we'll just take 2 minutes to brainstorm here together. Alrighty, 2 minutes. So we mixed it up there, right? We started with a big conversation, just kind of got everybody in the creative spirit here. And then we came up with probably like 30 different assumptions here. And I know folks are still going. That's perfect, right? This is a great way you can mix it up, right? Don't feel like we started brainstorming together, so now we have to. I think having these little interjections where you mix up your style, really, really effective way to collaborate together. And so going through this here, like we could, I think a typical way is to kind of do it round robin where everybody reads their list here. Another way to do it is everybody reads the first one, and if somebody says the one of yours already, you would just do like a strike through, so that way you can prune duplication very quickly as you're going through it. And that might be our best approach here, given the time constraint. So I will start, then we'll do Britt, then Spencer, Dustin, then Alice, and we can kind of go through there. And if somebody says one that was really similar to yours or a duplicate, just go to the next one and strike through. And then if you're out of them, we'll just say pass when we get to you. So I'll go first here. So I'll say students will have enough traffic to share their work effectively. And now Britt.
Would students want their own channel or fan base on this platform?
Would the student like the ability to turn off or on comments on their posts depending on kind of their comfort level?
Oh, that's me. For content creation, would we be using like WYSIWYG style or Markdown or something else?
So for me, I was mostly just asking questions because I'm coming out of this from nowhere. Like, how do we make it valuable above? Is this really what students want? What does that look like? That's kind of very vague right now.
Yeah. Very good point. So students know what content their audience wants them to write. My next one. And then Britt, I think you're...
Yeah, sorry, I was just looking for the unmute button. Are we including social media-ish things like likes or upvotes?
Do we incorporate this into the curriculum, like as a requirement, and or the student's portfolio as sort of something that they have to do?
I gathered questions from students. So this is from Alex Sierra. Could we have a flare to indicate where the student is in the program? But I want to pause real quick, Nick, because I feel like you are doing assumptions and we're just like, okay, what features could we throw at this? Like how would this work? So do you want to talk through real quick the difference from why we're doing it differently?
Yeah, I think that's really, really fair. And I think this really highlights a very good distinction between engineers and design and product people. And as we notice here, not to call too much attention to it, but Britt, Spencer, and Dustin are all engineers, and Alice and myself are more product-oriented, although I think we both do some engineering as well. And I think we approached it from two very, very, very different sides of the equation, right? And so I think when we talk about this in product development, right, we talk about this idea of the problem space and the solution space. And assumptions reside in the problem space. What is the problem? What does it look like? How do we know we're solving the right thing, or we're doing something that is actually useful or valuable for somebody, right? So these are kind of where assumptions come into place versus like technical questions step into the solution space. What are we going to build? What feature will we need? Does it need to be able to do this? Those are all things that we're starting to focus on in terms of solutions and how we're actually going to build the thing we want to build. And so getting comfortable staying in the problem space versus staying in the solution space and being able to go back and forth is a real skill. It takes a lot of time to develop. And I don't think anybody I've ever met is perfect at it. We all kind of flip back and forth there. And so questions, these kind of technical questions, are part of that transition from problem space to solution space. Assumptions, though, are definitely more firmly grounded in that problem space there. And so I definitely noticed that as well. But at this point, this was sort of a generative brainstorming exercise. And I don't think there are any wrong answers here because we're all trying to figure this problem out together. So definitely okay to go through these questions here as well. But thanks for pointing that out. That's a good point.
Yeah, that's something that, like you said, I'm coming from an engineering perspective. And so my immediate thought is, what features could I put on here? This would be so much fun to program. So I love the distinction of the problem space and the solution space. I am 100% thinking in the solution space. Thanks for clarifying that. I think that's really valuable for a lot of our students watching right now.
I couldn't have said that better myself ever. So.
It's like I do this every day, all day. But anyway, come look at our training kit. It's a lot of fun in the UX design because we talk about the problem space a lot, and that's how we that's kind of where we operate as UX designers.
Awesome. Do we want to keep going? I think Alice was up.
Yeah, I think so.
So I was just thinking about recruiters because I feel like the point of these students writing this would be getting jobs and money, and how do we compel people to look at it? Is this compelling? Was the question.
Awesome. So come back to the top here. So we've got an assumption, implicit assumption that students have an audience to begin with if they wouldn't need some sort of audience building help. So Britt?
I like that, yeah.
Yeah, similar to Alice's, but not exactly the same, is what types of posts will do well on this platform. So would videos do better than lists? Would lists do better than blog posts? So on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of along those same assumptions of like, that anyone's going to look at it. How are we even incentivizing the students at all to use this over, some platform that already does exist, like Medium, or just writing their own blog?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So my next one was having up and down votes and categories by tracks. Problem or solution based comment there.
Did we lose Alice?
Oh no, I'm still here. Sorry, I was blowing my
cool.
nose. Sick. It's good you're not next to me. Let's see. This was Where Will It Live, which was bouncing right off of, I think, what Britt or someone just said. We'll put this on Lambda School, portfolios, Dribble. Like, how are people going to reach this? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So kind of similar to what everyone else has been saying, but we're assuming that students are not satisfied with current posting platforms, so things like Medium or WordPress or something similar.
That's the best real assumption I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
That was also my next one. What sets us apart? Why use this over DevTO or Medium?
Sure. That's awesome.
Another solution would be like, I think syntax highlighting would be really awesome for the coding students that are in a like web or iOS track.
Mm-hmm.
So I just had a thought from Samantha Eggy's comment. She said, is this only for Lambda or Lambda students? We are trying to figure that out, but maybe an assumption we're making is that this is only for Lambda. Maybe this could be open up to the world. I don't know.
Yeah, let's write that one down. So let's
Okay,
go ahead and go under you. Or that's I'll let you write that one out because of your thought. Alice, what was your next one?
I'll skip one of those and I'll just go to the metrics. How will we track success of this? A lot of times it's page views for Medium, and Medium also does time spent on page, which was interesting when I used to use Medium. But I'm wondering if it was like an actual outcome, like if that makes sense. Are they getting hired or are students? I don't know, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's super important. I guess my last one was a little bit too pie in the sky, but students know how to develop a content strategy. But that's probably getting too far. In Brainstorm, you'll do that. You'll just have one that's like, I just need to get this out of my head so I can move on to my next thought. And that was that for me. But definitely okay in a brainstorming situation. I think we got to, Britt, did you have another one?
No, pass.
Pass? Okay. Spencer, I think we're at the last year or two.
Yep, I'm good.
Alrighty.
I love that
Dustin,
content building one just because you could gamify it and then you've just done something cool with the platform.
mm-hmm.
The other, I think we don't want to assume what kind of content. So Samantha also mentioned in the thread, is this going to be for soft content versus skilled content? I don't think we want to make an assumption either way.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe we do. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's super fair. And then I think we went through, Dustin, you might have one more in here, following authors and favoriting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. So that is, I think, again, going one by one like that and kind of saying your top item or your latest item. That way you can see similarities faster. Sometimes if you just do a brain dump, nobody's paying attention to what you're saying because they're thinking about what they're going to say in 5 minutes or 2 minutes. And so going one by one like that helps you kind of foster that collaboration a little bit faster and a little bit easier. Awesome. So I think what we've done here is we've we've gotten a much better picture of this problem space, right? We have a much better understanding of what it is that we're exactly trying to solve. So I want to come back here to this problem statement, and let's tweak this a little bit more. Let's refine it based on these assumptions that we're making here. And I think the biggest assumption that we've made here is that, and that we all kind of resonated with, was that a blog and like a vehicle for posting articles is something that students are going to want, and they're going to want to highlight their work with, right?
Make the doc full screen.
Yeah, sorry, I'll go back to that. Is that better for everybody? You know what, I can zoom in a little more. Is that better?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. And so we were kind of making this implicit assumption. Everybody called it out. And when you see a pattern like that, so why go through this exercise? It's because you want to look for patterns, right? What are people thinking about, and what are similar issues that we're all identifying? And from here, we can really start extracting some more detailed, a better picture of this problem. So I think what we're realizing is that a blog post or just a simple blogging platform is not necessarily a great value add to the existing ecosystem, right? We've got Medium, we've got Dev2, we've got, you could blog on Twitter really if you wanted to keep it short. So there's not a ton of, I think, value that we could add, except I think Spencer brought this up, this idea that students will want prompts, right? Or something to guide them through your writing. That is interesting. That's something that I think we can all kind of see adds a lot of value. So maybe we can tweak this problem statement a little bit more to focus around that, to make sure we have some sort of intrinsic value built into this. So maybe we can say, we'll start with this. We'll start with this first sentence here. It's okay, copy and paste. That's all good. It's okay to build on what you have. And so by building a prompt generator, we'd help them avoid the problem of staring at a blank page, so they can spend more time writing, right? And so this is, I think, a really interesting, first off, before I get into, put my instructor hat on too much, how does everybody feel about that as a problem statement based on our assumptions here?
I think it's great.
That's
Yeah, I
great.
like it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Does anybody like, this doesn't work at all, we want to pull more from what we had previously?
Oh, this is cool. I like this.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm on board now.
Cool. Awesome, right? And so this is how ideas work in professional settings and realistic real world settings, right? Very rarely do you have like the brief and then you just completely execute it. I know we do that a little bit at Lambda because we're doing assessments and assignments and things like that. But a lot of times you start with a problem and you learn a little bit more about it, or you think about it a little bit more, and you're like, is this the best way we could be spending our time, our efforts? And a lot of times it's no, and you refine that idea and you keep building from there. So now we've refined the idea a little bit more, and now we're building something that's going to deliver, I think, much more value to students here, just to this simple exercise like this. Awesome. So so based on this, and is there anything we want to add to this to make this? Right now we're just generating like a prompt builder. Do we want to make this more robust, or do we want to do more research to kind of get a feeling for the path we want to take on that?
So with this, are we saying that we're just building the prompt generator and then it would like spit out more or less the full thing and then they could post it somewhere? Or are we still assuming that we're going to be building the platform that this eventually gets posted to?
Yeah, that's the thread I want to tug on. I want to make sure we're all on the same page here about, is this something that's like literally you just take the prompt, you go post it on Medium, or is this something that's more integrated into a full stack platform, so to speak? How do we feel about that?
I like the idea of the platform personally.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, so instead of maybe, so instead of saying by building a prompt generator, and I'm going to make a new version, I'm just going to copy and paste this every single time. Oop, not like that though. and I think this is a really good habit to get into, especially if you're a designer, right? We're iterating here, and you want to make sure you can see where you came from, because that sometimes you go back for that idea, for that nugget of wisdom that you forgot about. So I was copy and paste. You've got infinite space here in Google Docs, so you might as well use it, right? So this is a good habit to get into. So instead of saying by building a prompt generator, we could say by combining a prompt generator, maybe we could say content guide, with a blogging platform, right? I don't know why Grammarly is telling me that. A blogging platform would help them avoid the problem of staring at a blank page. So we'd help them avoid. I think we're helping to guide their content to be more effective for promoting their skills and knowledge, which I think it aligns a little bit more with what we're trying to do here at Lambda. How do we feel about that now?
So someone brought up the point that maybe if we have a prompting tool, it's going to feel like their post is too controlled by Lambda. Mm-hmm. So maybe this prompting feature is optional. Like if you're staring at a blank page and you're having trouble writing, then you can turn the prompt feature on and it will prompt you with questions.
I like that because then it answers the assumption of, are we dealing with students who are already blogging regularly, know how to start, know how to complete, because that's the hardest thing, versus students that have never done this before. So maybe for those experienced students, they turn the prompt generator off and they're good at this already, but those who have never blogged before can use that to help them.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense, and that user story there I think resonates. So I think what we're going to do here is we're going to grab this first one, right? Because that talked about the blogging, and then we can go ahead and grab this line here and say by incorporating an optional.
By the way, Alice has to jump off in a couple minutes. So Alice, do you have any other thoughts before you?
No, I actually am sad. I have to go to this doctor's appointment. I didn't know this was happening, and now I'm wanting to cancel it. If you can record the second half, I want to watch and see where this.
We are recording. Yep. We are recording.
Great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alice. Everybody send Alice some love in the Lambda Expert Panel channel. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. Yeah.
Alrighty. So we've further refined this, right? So, and we've combined, right? We've taken the bits and pieces from our earlier work here and we've remixed them with what's going on down here. So now, right, we're building a platform for publishing and sharing their work. And then we're incorporating an optional prompt generator and content guide to guide their content to be more effective for promoting their skills now. So this feels like something valuable, right? We started with something generic, something that already exists in the world, and we thought about our user and we made some assumptions, and now we've got something that we think would be a little bit more valuable here for what they need to do. So I know we're running low on time here, but let's talk about the next part of this equation anymore. But before we do that, how do we all feel? Does this feel like something worth building, something we want to spend some time working on?
Yeah, I feel really good.
Definitely.
Nice.
And by the way, when Nick and I were planning this an hour ago, we jumped on a Zoom 1 hour ago at 12:40 Pacific time. I asked Nick, so what's your idea? Are you thinking of building like a platform like Medium, or are you thinking of like building a personal blog site? And Nick said, I don't know. I have no clue. That's why we're going to go through these steps. So this is really, really cool. This is literally generating an idea from a problem, and something that all of our students can go through these steps that we just demonstrated to get to a point that you're like, okay, now I have an idea of this product that I want to build. So this is so cool. I'm so excited.
Yeah, this doesn't take any specialized knowledge. We're not learning a framework. We're not playing with CSS floats or anything. This is something anybody can do. You just have to spend a little bit of time. And that's a thing that people don't want to do. They don't want to spend the time thinking about it, talking about it. But if you do that, you're saving yourself so much work and rework in the future. And that's a lot of the value that UX designers bring to the equation as well. I'm going to keep tooting our horn because I think definitely need some love in UX. So
yes.
I'm going to keep talking about it. Awesome.
I second
Okay.
that, Nick. I think if you start with a great design file and you take some time to plan before you start coding, you're saving yourself hours of headaches down the road.
Yeah, that's at least been my experience as well. So I like calling that one out. Okay, so we've got our problem statement here, and so a lot of times you'll do this kind of generative work, and you'll come back to it like months later, and you'll be like, which one did we actually pick? And so one thing that I like to do is either like, all right, we've got it. I'm going to bold it, but I'm also going to add a little label saying we picked this one. Right? That way, in 3 months when I come back to this, and I'm looking for my down caret, but it's not. That's okay. We'll just do this. There we go. All right. Got a little icon in there. So that way I have some reference for myself, right? You always want to think about where am I going to be 3 months in the future and how can I make my life easier? That's why we use Git. That's why we leave little notes and annotations for ourselves. And so that is it's going to be super, super helpful for us. Okay, so now we've got our problem statement here. The next thing we would do, right? So when we're building these products, right, we're typically following some sort of product design or product development cycle. And that generally speaking starts with some research or discovery. We move into synthesis where we're trying to understand and extract insights from that research. Then we move into ideation, right? What are the solutions? What are the infinite number of solutions we can come up with that solve this problem? And then we try and validate it. We actually put it in front of users to say, is this what you want? Is this something that you need? Ideally, you've done enough research that you know it's kind of something what they want, but validating with user testing and something like that is a useful way to say, okay, the solution actually works for them and our ideation went well. And you have designers in that process, you have your engineers in that process. That should be a really collaborative experience for everybody like we're doing right now. So let's go ahead and keep on rolling here. And I want to call that out. So this whole, like I sure came up with this first one here, I articulated this, but Spencer was talking about the content, right? If we come down here, the students will want prompts to guide them through their writing. I'm the designer, Spencer's the engineer. If he was not in this conversation, we would not have gotten that insight, right? So you want to do this as collaboratively as possible. You never know where the best idea is going to come from. So don't shoot anybody down. Don't say you can't come to the brainstorming session. Get everybody in the room, get everybody at the table, because that's where you're going to get the real collaborative insights. Awesome. So I just want to call that out. Okay, so we've talked about that. Now let's go to our next thing. So this is kind of a planning document. I want to go ahead and create a new folder here, right? Make sure we have our folder structure really set up. And let's go ahead and call this research. So the next thing I will want to do, right? We've got some assumptions here. We've got some big ideas, and I want to go ask some people who are going to be using this if this is something that they would be interested in, and I want to learn a little bit more about it. So we'll go ahead and we're going to call this our user interview script, right? Something like that. And I'll go ahead and make this a title here. Interview script. Cool. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to learn more about this problem space by talking to the people who we think would actually be using it. And so typically what I'll do is I'll grab the problem statement. So this is and bring it over just so I don't have to go back and forth between the two docs. So I'll say problem statement here. Again, labels. Very, very important. And okay, we'll go ahead and unbold that. Cool. So we got our problem statement here, a little bit more, a little text hierarchy. Okay, nice. And the next thing I want to do is what are our objectives for this research session, right? What do we want to learn from our user? And again, this comes back to our assumptions. What were we assuming about the experience here? So objectives for this learning, this research session here. And these can be like validating certain assumptions. So I think the first assumption we have implicitly in here is the students don't know what to write about. So that's kind of an implicit one. Students don't know what to write about. Students, again, we're still kind of assuming that they want a publishing platform. So maybe students are interested in sharing their work, right? That's an assumption we're making here. And what other ones would we want? Any other ideas? Anybody else? And let me share this to everybody so y'all can jump in.
I think the other assumption is that like current platforms aren't working for students and they're actually looking for somewhere else to write. I was
going to say something like that. I like that wording, that framing. Like the assumption that this is actually something that Lambda students need and would use, I guess.
students need a platform like this. Absolutely. I think we're also making another implicit assumption that who is the audience, that we're going to attract hiring managers here, or we're going to attract recruiters, people like that. It's kind of, it's implicit, right? And those are the hardest ones to spot here because it's not in the problem statement. But the point of getting our work out there and sharing it is to make sure we're sharing it with people who would want to hire us, right? So hiring managers, let's just call them that as a user category, would be able to find and enjoy, let's say find this work, and then the hiring managers would use this work to select candidates. Let's say something like that. What other assumptions? Any other ones we're thinking of? And I think for a single research session, this feels pretty good, right? We don't want to have tons and tons of questions.
I think this is good.
We can obviously come up with more, right? And you have multiple sessions, different sessions. I think right now this is feeling pretty good. Spencer, did you want to say something? I don't know if you unmuted or not.
No, I'm okay. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. So we've got our objectives here. And now we can get into writing our research script, right? Right? And so right now, based on these objectives here, we've got 2 that are kind of focused on hiring managers, but the other 4 are focused on students, right? And we've got 135 students in the Zoom right now. And if we do this quickly, maybe we can do a user interview if we can get the script together really quickly here. So we're looking for, plant that seed. We're looking for some brave volunteers here in a minute. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to grab the UX Programs Research Interview Guide or template. And this is just kind of a standard formatting here as well. So these are the things that we generally start asking before we conduct a user interview. In this case, you typically ask the user for their permission to start recording. In this case, we have already started recording. So just know by volunteering for this user interview, we are going to be implicitly recording that. So if you do not want to be recorded, do not raise your hand when we ask for volunteers for the user interview because it will be recorded. So you want to make sure you're letting the user know ahead of time that this is what is going to be happening here. So this is just kind of standard boilerplate as well. So we're, again, kind of this middle section here is again, just pretty generic, and that's okay. You can tailor it to be a little bit more specific to what you're talking about. And then down below, once you've gotten over this boilerplate, is when you can start asking the questions that are specific. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab these 3 objectives that we'd like to learn about. And I'm going to start thinking, what questions can I ask to the student to get a little bit more information here. And of course, you don't want to necessarily dive right into this. You want to ask a couple of initial questions to warm up the candidate, to make them feel comfortable, build some rapport with yourself. So typically the first question I'll ask is something generic. So if I don't know their name, I'll say, what's your name? Where are you from? Just kind of the generic sort of, what is your name? So kind of your classics. Where are you from? And I think a lot of times in user interviews, people are afraid to connect to the user as a human. And I've always found that it's better, like if you know where they're from, like they say, oh, I'm from New York City, like, oh, my cousin lives there. That's okay to have that dialogue. Some people feel really rigid in their user interviews, but that's definitely something you're allowed to connect with the user. Don't feel like you have to be a robot just reading the questions here. So where are you from? Okay, so those are kind of our warm-up ones. So students don't know what to write about. And so right now we're kind of asking about blogging and writing and publishing content on the web. So maybe we'll start with a big picture one. So have you ever published content on the web, right? This is a really important question. If they've never done this, I would stop the interview right here, right? I wouldn't keep going unless I had some like backup questions to ask that person. But I'd be done right here because they wouldn't be the user that I'm looking to interview. So have you ever published content on the web? What kind of content was it? We're kind of assuming that people are writing their content, but we also have had this conversation about publishing videos, putting images up as well. So that's, again, we can kind of get some more insight into that sort of information here.
If part of our target audience are those who don't know how to publish content, could we have a different track of questions for people who haven't published content on the web?
Yeah,
That's our
absolutely.
First assumption. Our first assumption is students don't know what to write about.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. So you can say if yes, and then you can say if no here, so we can kind of do our choose our own adventure like that. Have you ever thought about it? I could spell today. Oh boy. Have you ever thought about it? What is preventing you from doing so? Right, just kind of basic questions. What do I want to know from this person about their experience, right? What has prevented them from going down this path before? So if yes, what kind of content was it? How did you share it? Maybe did you share your work? If so, how, right? What platforms have you used? So have you used? Did you like the experience? What did you like about the experience? Right. You don't want to give yes or no questions, right? That's something you'll find yourself naturally trying to ask. So like, did you enjoy the experience on that platform? That's a yes or no question, right? You can ask instead, what did you like about that experience? And you're like, oh, I've got a wealth of information now that I can pull from, and that's a much better question. So what did you, obviously you can have some, that's not a hard and fast rule. That's just a better way to think about it. So what did you like about the experience? What didn't you, right? And we can kind of keep on going on and on like this. Would you consider switching, right? This kind of gets to what we're trying to understand here. What would motivate you to do so? Sometimes it's nice to ask the same question 2 different ways. So that way you can approach it from different angles. Sometimes people just need to hear the same question a little bit differently, and that they'll have a whole different answer. So you can definitely ask like this as well. And this is basically it, right? You start with your objectives. What do I want to know from this person? What am I trying to validate? And you can start generating your script from there, trying to ask those open-ended questions in a little bit more detail. I know we're very, very close to time, and I don't want this to only be user experience. I know we've got 3 very talented engineers here as well. And so I'd love to kind of turn it over to Dustin and maybe start thinking, based on this direction that we're going, what are any technical thoughts or considerations you all are having based on the work we've done so far?
I mean, I'd like to get thinking about a prompt generator. Is this a point, could we use user interviews to understand how that prompt generator would work, like what kind of prompts? So maybe for those students that, or I guess for either, but yeah, just curious as how we're going to start putting that together, because that's a big category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of these questions were focused on validating that this is a viable idea. And I think with the first interview, that's kind of what you want to, first couple, like 10 or so interviews, that's kind of what you want to figure out. Is this even something worth pursuing, worth the time that y'all are investing? Right? If we add up the 5 people who are on the panel, that's an hours. This is 5 product team hours that we're putting into this already. And we could put a heck of a lot more in if we keep going down this path without understanding viability. So I would typically start here, but and again, you kind of get a sense for like 10, 15 questions is probably as much as you're going to get through in a single session, like a 20, 30-minute session. You could double it, you can make it an hour, but then people start losing interest. So you're kind of balancing those 2 things. And you want to leave a little bit of time for people just coming up with just random answers and you going down that rabbit hole with them. So these are kind of the things that I would be thinking of. But I think it's really fair to ask some questions here, maybe especially like if you had some help, would you consider publishing? And again, this is getting into a yes or no kind of question. So if you have some help, how would that change your mindset? right? Maybe something a little bit larger, open-ended like that. Or how would that change your thinking around not publishing, something like that. And we can start getting into those details a little bit more. And I think because that idea is focused more on like the first-time publisher as opposed to the experienced one, this would be where we would start going down that rabbit hole with those users who classify themselves a little bit more. But anyway, that is how we would get to this point.
There was a question that came up. Nick Kendall asked, for the interviews, are these only to be done live or questionnaires as well, qualitative versus quantitative?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is all qualitative research right here. You could put in a survey and it's still qualitative research. You're just using a survey to answer these questions, right? Quantitative is when we get numerical with the data set. And so, and so if you were doing like a Likert scale, or you're like on a scale of 1 to 10, how interested are you in publishing online? That is quantitative research, but because these are questions looking for open-ended responses, it's qualitative. So that's the distinction there. So I will always start qualitative. You do not know enough about the problem space to be asking quantitative questions. And that typically happens once you've already, I really get into quantitative research once I have a product and I know it's working, because in those early stages, you want to be able to follow up with someone and say, why do you think that way? What is happening here? Why are you behaving in this manner? And if you're doing a lot of quantitative research, you never have that follow-up opportunity. And in the beginning, you need to have that full picture understanding. Otherwise, you're not going to build something that somebody actually wants. You're probably going to build something that fits a number set really nicely, but is probably not really considering a full human perspective. So hopefully that adds some perspective clarity there.
Do we get to do an interview?
I think we're at our hour, so unfortunately that is not enough time to do a user interview. But I think we could definitely start off next time doing it.
Okay, we have a few volunteers because I did ask on
Awesome.
Slack.
Perfect.
So hopefully Kyle, Samantha, Christina, Mary, and Sean, if you're around next month, and Michelle just added as well. We've got 6 volunteers that we can choose from so far. So
awesome. And maybe we can do a couple asynchronously, and then we'll do one live for everybody as well, so we have more research.
Great, that'd be awesome. Nick, if there were, we'll push just a couple minutes past the hour. Sorry, everybody. I know we promised 1 hour, but we started late, so this is only 1 hour. 3 objectives that you would want students, 2 or 3 objectives that you would want students to take away from this. What would they be?
Yeah. So the biggest one is start with the research, start with the problem, right? I'm an engineer too, right? I code. I know how difficult it is to say, I'm not going to go build the cool thing, because that's what we want to do. That's what we've been trained to do, right? And that's so hard to fight. But don't do that. You're doing yourself a tremendous disservice if you haven't thought about what are we actually building, and why would anybody want this, and who is that person who we need to build it for anyway. When you have those things figured out, and hopefully your UX designer can help you figure those things out, that is when you actually build software that really matters and that makes a difference. I think there's a great saying, life's too short to build something nobody wants. You all have the power as engineers to build anything. Literally anything. I've seen teams do this time and time again. But what you want to do is build something that somebody actually wants to use. Otherwise, what's the point? So really take that moment, figure out what are you building, why are you building it, who are you building it for? So that's my big takeaway. And so if I was going to say one objective, that would be the one I would focus in on.
Awesome. And I think that's what I took from this too. It's I haven't been involved in, I've done this once or twice a long time ago, and I haven't been involved in this process for a long time. And it is easy to get sucked into that solution mindset. Britt had to jump off. She's got some endorsement interviews to do. But Spencer, what do you have a takeaway for today?
Yeah, I've just this whole planning process has been something that I've really enjoyed just being a part of, but also I think more than anything, this is sort of a confirmation that when I tell my students that are going into build weeks that they need to take a fair amount of time to plan out their projects, that it's really worth it. Because I agree, and I've personally done this myself before, and I've seen students do it, where they just go headfirst into building a project, and then, in our case, they code themselves into a corner, and then they're like, I just wasted a quarter or a half of my entire build week on this thing that is not feasible, or whatever it is. And so I think hopefully for everyone that's watching this, they can really take away that doing even this 1 hour of planning, we were able to get a ton of work done. So if you could take an afternoon to plan out like a build weeks project or a labs project or your own personal project as you are, doing interviews, it really does go a long way. And that's something I had to learn the hard way. Like I said, I'm not much of a planner in my life, but I've definitely, over my time as a developer, learned the importance of doing it. So I hope this can be a really good guide for students to just do that themselves and kind of get off on the right foot and not have to experience that, coding themselves into a corner, or, building a product into a corner, for them to learn that planning is a good thing. So.
Awesome. I posted on the Lambda expert panel asking what your biggest takeaway is. So please take a second we've got some really good comments going into that thread. Jump in there and put down what you learned today. And we will come back next week for some user interviews and a little bit more of the planning. Are we going to get into design at that point?
We might, we'll see how fast we go. We're next month though. It's not next week. We're doing this monthly.
Oh, did I say month?
Yeah, just want to make sure we're all on the same page. We can't commit to the
month.
weekly cadence just yet. But yeah, and building on what Spencer said, going into build weeks, your UX designer, if you can work with them on your team, they've been thinking about the product you're working on for a long time. Have the conversation with them, because they're there to help you and facilitate that conversation. But designers, that's a two-way street, right? Notice how we did it collaboratively. Even though I've been thinking about the problem as a designer for a long time, everybody was brainstorming together. We talked about the problem, what we're trying to solve together, right? So it has to be a two-way street there. So make sure if you're fortunate enough to work in those cross-collaborative teams, leverage that UX designer, make sure you're including everybody and you have a conversation, and don't feel like it's my way or the highway, because that's when you run into troubles from the other side of the equation. So definitely treat it like a conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. This was so cool. I'm excited for next month. So we'll see you second Friday of every month. We'll see you then.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.